Welcome back to Decouple. Today I'm joined by returning guest Noah Rettberg. This is now Noah's third appearance. Noah is a Decouple bestseller, currently ranked number 2 in the charts, right behind Doomberg. You're in good company, Noah. And Noah is a physics laboratory technician in training, which kind of baffles my mind because Noah's also just an absolute encyclopedia. Not only of all things technical, you were just, I think we were a little delayed in signing on to this podcast because you were battling on Twitter with Michael Liebreich over the relative value of methanol as a syn fuel. We're not going to jump down that rabbit hole, but Noah, I feel like you've been busy, probably all your life in terms of amassing the knowledge that you have, but also particularly, in the last 6 or 7 months since we started interacting. So anyway, thank you for making the time to come back on Decouple.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored. And somewhat surprised that I could beat out Martin Nelson.
Oh, don't rub that in too hard. don't
if you say I'm the second one, that means I have beat Martin Nelson, and I'm surprised.
Okay. a little decouple grandstanding. So Noah, I'm excited to have you back. We've had episodes. Number 1 with you is the grim fairy tale of German electricity, and that was
easier times.
Yeah, those were dark times, but things have only gotten worse. We had an update with you, Germany, the canary in the coal mine. That was about 2 months ago, and we promised we'd have you back for an update. What I love, about having you on the podcast is this not only great technical knowledge, but also have a knowledge of folklore, fairy tales, cultural trends, etc. But also just getting this kind of boots on the ground sense of what things are like in Europe, and more specifically in Germany, which is really the kind of epicenter of the energy policy that has led to this crisis, and to a large degree to the crisis itself being so hooked up to Russian natural gas. I just was chatting with Doomberg yesterday. We recorded an episode, and it was a lot of fun. It's going to be great when it comes out. But there's something different about two North Americans talking about this versus talking with someone right there on the ground. So my thoughts today are covering the latest in terms of the results of the famous German stress test, what's going on with the reactor extensions, talking a little bit about what the energy crisis is looking like on the ground in terms of the incipient deindustrialization of Germany, if that's being overhyped or what that feels like. And of course, we recently graciously hosted your chancellor, Mr. Olaf Scholz, where the Canada-German Hydrogen Alliance was announced. I'm guessing this is bringing you great hope that you really dodged
Definitely.
a bullet, with the whole Putin thing, but that Canada's going to rescue you with our
Energiewende is saved right now, thanks to Canada.
All right, Noah. So I think what the people probably want to hear is, to start, is what is going on with the final 3 German reactors. There was an announcement by, I believe it was Minister Habeck, on this topic. Let's walk through that announcement and what's the latest there.
So I'm not letting Habeck get away with only talking about 3 reactors when we should really be talking about 6 reactors. So whether it's Twitter demonstrations or decouple podcasts, we will be talking about 6 reactors, I hope.
Yes.
Yes. So basically, immediately after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, we started talking more publicly in Germany about keeping those reactors. Then for a few months, it didn't seem to be going that terribly. It seemed like Habeck had the situation under control as the Minister of the Economy, Energy, Climate Change, and also the Vice Chancellor. He has a lot of responsibility, and it seemed like it fooled a lot of people, partially also me, that he was able to get enough supply of natural gas to Germany. But starting in June, July, it became apparent that this wasn't the case anymore. Russia kept throttling the supply of natural gas to Europe, and the supply of oil and coal. And we started to stop buying oil and coal from there. So also we started into running logistical problems as we tried to replace natural gas power plants with coal power plants. So back then in July, I think it was July, yes, Habeck announced the stress test because then voices demanding the continued operation of nuclear reactors reappeared. So he said he will order a stress test. He will tell the grid operators to look into several scenarios into which the continued operation of those reactors is necessary to keep the lights on. And keep in mind that when we talk about keeping lights on, we talk about keeping the lights on and not talking about displacing like coal, of which we are now burning like close to 20 gigawatts in baseload. So
I thought
there
baseload
is
didn't exist. Okay, bad joke. Sorry.
No, we're burning a crap ton of coal, and there are a lot of good reasons: lowering price, lowering CO2 emission, preventing air pollution, preventing production of toxic coal ash, not using so much amount of the global coal supply so that poor countries can use some coal. So there are good reasons to keep these reactors running.
Right.
Many good reasons to keep those reactors running beyond will we be able to keep the lights on.
Right.
But what the stress test looked into is just can we keep the lights on. And what it found out is it's extremely hard to keep the lights on, especially in South Germany. South Germany, if you had looked at South German electricity at around 2010, you would find that it's much more closer to France and not to like what average Germany is now. It had a lot of reactors. Bavaria got 70% of its electricity from nuclear. The rest mostly came from hydro. So it's also like in France, nuclear, hydro, some renewables, and some fossils. It was comparable to that in Bavaria, very much the France of Germany. And Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg, the South German states, had the most nuclear power plants, and then were forced to shut them down. And they now have barely any coal power plants. And also, what they have in other power plants, mostly gas power plants. So it will be very hard to keep the lights on in South Germany, more than in also somewhat in the middle of Germany, where I am right now, because also with Gronde there isn't really a significant power plant here for like 200 kilometers in every direction. So hard times. And this was what the stress test found out. So what the stress test recommended is especially keeping those two nuclear power plants in the south operating, but also with less emphasis also keeping operated the Emsland nuclear power plant in the north. It didn't look into whether the 3 shut down nuclear power plants could be turned back on. That just wasn't what it's designed for. So that what came out. And when it came out, Habeck announced what consequences he would take from this. And the consequences he took are the following. He said all those reactors will still be shut down on 31st December this year. And the 2 in the south will be kept ready as a backup for another 4 months. And like it is always in Germany, because German media has such a love affair with the Green Party, German media love to talk about how much of a realist is. I mean, part of it, like the love is weaning right now. I think more and more people are seeing that Habeck is a stumbling buffoon and not a competent minister. So some in the media picked it up that what he suggested wasn't really a good idea, but others lauded him for being a realist and even somewhat bending green principles to like the nuclear phase-out to keep the lights on.
It sort of sounds like he's thinking about a nuclear power plant as if it's a coal plant in terms of that idea that you can just sort of keep it idling and fire it up, to save the day when the lights all go out in the south.
I mean, it's also hard with a coal power plant. If you really only bring it back in a short time, it's really only an option with a gas power plant. The coal power plants will run into somewhat similar issues, as a lot of with the startup procedure is slowly bringing this giant machine up to temperature. You can not just fire it hot from 20 degrees to a few hundred degrees in like an hour. So those giant machines need time to start up to get hot evenly throughout all the steam lines, the turbines. That can't just be fast-tracked. So that is one thing. And there's also an issue with coal power plant. Another issue with the nuclear power plants is right now that they are running on fuel that also has already a high burn-up behind it. So the reactivity of the fuel rods in the core is low. It could be increased once again by reshuffling, reordering the fuel rods in a way that's more neutrally efficient. That could be done, but that would basically commit to a full maintenance outage to reshuffle all those fuel elements, which would be pointless if you want to just keep it ready for a few months. And would take like a month, especially if it's an unplanned outage, because all the outages we had in Germany before could be finished in a short time, that they were planned very far ahead. That isn't going to be the case here. So what he says is that he wants to take them as a reserve. So as those cores are very low on reactivity, it is hard to start them back up again. We're talking about pressurized water reactors. So pressurized water reactors have boric acid in their core. The boric acid absorbs neutrons and thus controls the reaction. If the core is fresh, it will start up at a concentration of 1,400 parts per million usually. If the reactor is shut down, it sits at 2,800 parts per million. So, and all those reactors, in the way that they are already this depleted, can only be started up at around 0 parts per million. Maybe the ISAR 2 plant has a bit more reactivity, it would be easier to restart it, but Neckar-Westheim and Emsland are really low. They will be running on stretch out already on December 31st, probably. And alone, this slowly taking out the boric acid from the primary circuit will take a week before you can start up the reactor. So this isn't really an option. We could perfectly keep those reactors running for several more months, probably ISAR until summer. And if we would shut them down and reshuffle them, we could even run them for even more time. But starting them up from a core that is this depleted in its reactivity is really hard, in addition to all the other procedures that you would normally need to fire up a nuclear reactor like this, which would take 30 hours if you are already prepared and are willing to mistreat your reactor, and more like 3 days if you do it carefully.
So where's the gap here? You know, we just published an interview with the former head of the Australian Nuclear Association, Robert Parker, and one of the things that he was lamenting was the collapse, essentially, of a competent public service with engineering discipline who could advise the politicians, because so many of the West politicians have no engineering discipline, have no STEM training. I believe Habeck is a PhD in literature, best known for children's books that he's written. And
Yes.
now it sounds like he's maybe the or one of the most powerful people in Germany, and by virtue of that in the entire EU, making these life and death decisions. And, you know, I may be wrong on this, but it sounds like his conception of a nuclear reactor is there's just a little light switch in the wall and you can flick it on when your grid's crashing. In terms
I
of your
don't think
analysis of
that.
German,
I think there is another reason why he has put out this ridiculous offer.
okay,
He has put
Explain.
this out because he pretty much can know. Like, I don't want to speak for his competence, but even if some of these advisors have even the barest minimum of competence, he would know that this is an impossibility.
Okay.
What I think he is doing with this is trying to deflect the blame from him to the nuclear operators and to the technology itself. So
Gotcha.
what he is essentially saying or tries to present, and parts of the German media have picked up on this and wanted to help him present himself in this way, is I am the realist. My nuclear principle, anti-nuclear principles are strong, but I'm partially overcoming my anti-nuclear principles for the good of the people.
Right.
So I think this is what he tries to present himself as, and he knows that the nuclear operators can only deny what he's asking of them. If they want to run the reactors like he imagines it in his idea, it would mean running the reactors hot, like having the reactor on at reduced power, raising the reactor and blowing steam into the condensers, also requiring electricity to run the systems of the reactors for no return, or having the reactors hot, which means running the pumps in the reactor, which keep the reactor on temperature, and also producing steam from the auxiliary steam generators, which means that this such a nuclear power plant would be burning 30, 50 megawatts of heating oil and 30 megawatts of electricity to stay hot but subcritical.
Wow.
And also keeping the reactor in such a mode for a time longer than a few days or a week has never been done before, and not with a reactor that has been a core that is this much depleted, essentially when it was already decided it was to be decommissioned. So what he is demanding can't be done. And
This can't be done.
it can't be done. The reactors can be operated, continue to be operated until spring or summer, keeping them on, but you can't turn them back on in just like he imagines it to be that late. And I think he knows that. He has been told that. And bets on the nuclear operators saying, okay, we can't do that, to then deflect the blame on them. Right. So I don't think I'm not trying to speak for his competence, but I would bet he's at least competent or has competent advisors that know that this isn't impossible. I would bet on sinister ideas that he had when he came up with this idea. Wow. So he could tell the people, "Oh yes, you see, it's not my fault for being stubborn. It's the fault of the nuclear technology, which just sucks."
So, if Noah Rettberg was sitting in that office and had that position, what would your plan be? What would that look like in terms of running those remaining 3 reactors? What's the best possible policy choice that can be made? Again, you've provided that context of by Germany shutting those reactors down, burning more coal. That has implications, obviously, for the climate, for air pollution, for poorer countries who might need that coal. You presented a very compelling case for why to keep them on. How would you maximize Germany's remaining nuclear potential, and even the 3 that were shut down last year? What kind of potential is there if there was?
So when we talk about the reactors that are still running, the 3, we are talking about Emsland, Neckar-Westheim, and Isar 2. All 3 are Baulinie 80 reactors. Basically, I think one of the best nuclear reactors that has ever been built. 3 Gen 3 reactors that have been built in a few years on a low budget and had ran since they were commissioned flawlessly.
Yeah.
Isar 2 had been essentially the reactor with the highest capacity factor in the world. It has been the most productive reactor 10 years in its 33-year lifetime. So those are tremendous plants in every way, and they are kept in perfect condition until the very last. So when we talk about these reactors, Emsland has probably fuel to run and stretch out until March. Neckar-Westheim probably also, maybe April. Isar 2 has a lot more fuel. When they planned the last cycle, they loaded basically everything they had in the core. So they loaded more fuel than they had, which allowed them to have a more reactive, a more easy to run core, even though they didn't need to load that much fuel to get to December 31st. Which means that even in the new year, they can run for several months at full power. I have, from 2 people which have more knowledge about those specific reactors, heard 2 competing timelines until they can run on full power. One said probably around March. Another said they could probably even run until May at full power. And even when they can't run on full power anymore, they can run on stretch out, basically reducing power by 0.6% every day until they get to around 70% power. Then they have to shut down. So that's what they can do. The 2 reactors can run stretch out until spring, and the 1 reactor in Isar can run at full power until spring and stretch out until summer. That is the state of the running reactors. And then we have also 3 reactors which we decommissioned recently. Grunde, Brockdorf, and Gundremmingen. Gundremmingen had been given license to decommission basically before it shut down. So immediately after they shut down, they started decommissioning. They have been taking apart the steam lines. They have cut control lines. So I'm kind of guessing to whether this reactor can be put back into operation. I would probably say yes, but it would take years. It isn't easy to take this reactor back into operation. Grunde and Brockdorf are a different story. They don't have license to decommission it. So all they could do decommissioning-wise is what they would do in a normal maintenance outage, plus cleaning out the reactor core with a little bit of acid. So in the state they have done a full system decontamination. They have unloaded the fuel from the reactors, and they have taken apart the turbo generators. But all that they did is stuff that is reversible and is usually done in a normal maintenance outage, so it can be reversed. If those maintenance outages are properly planned, they usually do them in a span of 3 weeks. They are crazy fast when they do that. They have extremely high capacity factor, rivaling the high capacity factor of the Americans, even though they have much shorter time online because they use less enriched fuel. So in Grunde, last year they loaded 50 new fuel rods out of the 193 fuel element core. In Brockdorf, they loaded 90 new fuel elements because they wanted to run a very long on time, which means that if we would reshuffle the core in Grunde, I mean, we need to put it back already, so it isn't in the reactor anymore. We need to put it back from the spent fuel pool into the reactor once again. So if we would do that, you would probably be able to scratch maybe 2 to 3 more months of full power operation out of the reactor, and then 2 to 3 months in stretch out operation. And in Brockdorf, since there are much more fresh fuel elements of the core, I mean, they have already had one cycle behind them, but only the one cycle, and there are more of them. So we would be talking about more months of full power operation, and then also 2 to 3 months of stretch out operation. So this is the state that we have right now, that we could take 2.8 gigawatts of nuclear reactors back online and keep running 4.1 gigawatts of nuclear reactors until spring, and 2 reactors with Brockdorf until summer. ANF, Advanced Nuclear Fuel, Framatom's subsidiary in Germany, and Westinghouse in Sweden have for a long time now been saying that if Germany were to order new fuel elements, they could make them ready in a time of up to 1 year. So we could not only have 5 of those reactors running at close to full power through the winter and somewhat even into the spring and into summer, we could have them back online again for the next winter if we do the right steps now.
Right. And, to be clear, I mean, I think it was the Belgian minister, I'm not sure which portfolio, but saying, we're headed towards potentially 10 hard winters to come. This crisis isn't going anywhere soon. I just wanted to comment, though. I mean, there was a great Twitter thread I retweeted by, I think it was Swiss investor Alexander Stahel, and he had some comments on the German fleet. And, you mentioned these remaining reactors, their operational excellence, but really that applied across the fleet when nuclear used to be 20-25% of the German grid. The average lifespan of the reactors of the fleet is, I heard, only 22 years because of all these premature closures. Is that correct? I mean, this is just...
No, it's more like 30.
30, okay.
It's so Grunde got to 37. ISAR will come to 34. If we look at Biblis, it was commissioned in 73. It was shut down in 2011.
Okay. All right.
So,
just wondering about an average number there. Not an important.
So
detail.
they were, most of them were shut down in their 30s.
Okay.
And The Borssele plant in the Netherlands, which is close to 50 or already 50, I'm not sure right now, um, has been built by KWU, the German reactor manufacturer, which
Right.
built all of those German nuclear plants. And this plant is still running. They are right now trying to extend its runtime. It will do way past 60 years of operation, more like 70, 80. It is after 50 years, it is already on its first set of steam generators. This is also a funny fact about German pressurized water reactors, is they never had any steam generators changed.
Wow.
Never. And I mean, Neckar Westheim would probably need some changed in 10 years time, but all the others, even after upgrades, and Borssele especially had got a pretty hefty upgrade, didn't need new steam generators. And also, since they are very spaciously built, it's changing the steam generators isn't that hard.
Right.
So those reactors, also being spaciously built, makes it far more easily to maintain the reactor. A nuclear technician in a German-built nuclear power plant can do his work standing, where in other nuclear power plant he would need to be crawling.
Right. Right.
Often inside the control systems, the electrical lines. In those spaces, you usually need to crawl. In other nuclear power plants in Germany, you can stand.
Yeah, I'm sensing a lot of pride here, and that sharpens the tragedy of closing these incredible pieces of infrastructure. Let's pivot a little bit then. We've got a sense of the sorry state of where things are at, where they could be. Let's talk about again this kind of feet on the ground sense of where things are at in Germany right now. What are you noticing around you right now, Noah? You know, in our pre-recording, you mentioned bakeries, metal smelters, all different kinds of manufacturers. We've been seeing tweets of people posting energy bills from across the EU, wondering how they're gonna survive. At least how their business will survive. Just give us a sense of the kind of gestalt of what it feels like on the German street right now.
So we saw prices for natural gas hiking from already a very high 150, 160 euros per megawatt hour 2 months ago to close to 400 euros per megawatt hour 2 weeks ago. Same with electricity prices growing beyond 1,000 euros per megawatt hour. So keep in mind that usually German households are used to paying around 90 euros per megawatt hour for natural gas and 30 euros per megawatt hour, which is already 300 euros per megawatt hour. German industry usually pays less than this because German households are essentially forced to subsidize renewables over their electricity bill, which they are now taking back after taking 500 billion euros out of consumers' pockets to fund the renewables industry. They are now funding it out of the coffers of the state because they want to reduce the burden on the people. That putting the burden on the state will, at another point, means the burden will be again on the people. They didn't mention when they talked about this. So this is the case. German industries usually paid electricity prices of 40, 50 euros per megawatt hour, and similarly to 20 to 30 euros per megawatt hour for natural gas. Smaller industrial consumers usually paid more for electricity since it was harder to connect them to the grid. But electricity was much more expensive than natural gas. So many industries use natural gas for process heat, especially like bakeries, where in countries that have an excess of electricity, it is more common to use electricity to bake. They all use natural gas. In the past, they used oil. Germany has still a lot of aluminum and steel industry. So Germany has seen much less. I mean, the West hasn't really seen any deindustrialization from that the other Western nations have seen. We have seen some structural change in East Germany, where basically industry collapsed after the collapse of the East German state. Um, and but that is now coming to us. We have seen aluminum factories. Trimet has been a good example of this, but also others. We have been seeing steel makers, glass makers, and now even toilet paper factories. So we are back to that peculiar type of shortage again. Reducing output, shutting down plants at all, or just going bankrupt already. We have seen producers of ammonia for fertilizer or for the production of AdBlue or other industrial chemicals reduce output or just stop producing at all, and which means basically they will be soon going under. I mean, Habeck can go on television and talk like a little child that if an industrial plant just needs to hoard its output, that doesn't mean it will go bankrupt. But that is what is happening. I'm not pretty sure if he is really that delusional or thinks that we are that delusional. But that is what he really went onto television and told us, that if just companies just stop producing for half a year, then they can just go back and are not
Just
totally
turn this,
bankrupt and bust after half of this year of not producing but still having to pay for running costs and employees.
but there's a common theme here. It's like a nuclear plant. You can just hit the little switch on the wall, and it all turns back on magically again, right? There's a commonality in the thinking. It's just interesting. Um, that's a pretty devastating picture. Like very cross sectoral. Um, like again, just what does it feel like in terms of the conversation when you talk to your friends or family or people on the street or even in the media? I mean, is there a panic? I've a friend sent me a Twitter poll about how Germans are still, despite the hardships of the energy crisis, which I think is being mostly blamed on Ukraine, not previous energy policy choices in terms of the mainstream media. That solidarity with Ukraine still runs quite high. Something like 70% are willing to tolerate, the repercussions of the energy crunch in order to stand by the Ukrainians. Is that your sense of where things are at, or
That would be new to me. There is a high support for delivering weapons to Ukraine, but support for keeping on the sanctions and is dwindling quickly.
yeah,
We have like one politician in Germany. Kubicki is his name. He's from the Liberal Party, and unlike the rest of the Liberal parties, he's really a populist. And I think he jumped the boat on COVID measures really
right,
early, coming out against it when it wasn't when it somewhat seemed that the popularity was shifting.
right,
And right now, like his entire party, the Liberal Party, is now arguing to keep those nuclear power plants. But especially Kubicki, has been now voicing support of the idea of commissioning the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, trying to get Russia to sell us more gas. So I think support for Ukraine militarily is generally high. I think that there, as I said, there is a lot of Russophilia in Germany's cultural creators, but in German society right now, most people see this war as Russian aggression, as Russian war crimes that need to be contained and to be fought, and are therefore sympathetic to the idea of delivering weapons to Ukraine. But in regards to do they want to freeze, do they want to go bankrupt in the winter? Of course not. Barely any does want that. And I think most of them that are in favor right now of keeping those sanctions and not begging the Russians to deliver gas again aren't really aware of the consequences. I think of the support that there is, there is an unawareness of how severe the consequences of this are. But a large, probably the amount of German, probably the majority of Germans right now understand more or less what is coming for then what is coming for the country. I mean, for Christ's sake, we don't have the energy to capture the CO2 from burning fossil fuels, to keep that CO2 to make sparkling water, which we in Germany love, and to make the protective atmosphere for food. So even that is running out now. There is an idea that something pretty terrible is coming for us that runs through German society right now, and a slight sense of desperation that you probably will find in everyone right now, in the sense that they don't know how to pay the bills in the future. Those that know how to pay the bills basically know how to pay the bills because they have savings which they can burn to pay the bills. But that means they have to burn their savings. They have to burn the savings that they thought they would be keeping for a rainy day. I mean, this is a rainy day now. They're keeping for a rainy day, for a future investment, for their future house, for the next car, for the next vacation, which now will be going to paying the bills for energy. And a lot of Germans don't know how to pay the bills, and the part that knows basically are now seeing their dreams, their hopes, and their aspirations crushed to keep on paying for basic needs.
Right. You shared a tweet with me that was
maybe probably lose their job in the future.
Yeah, you shared a tweet with me that was really powerful. I'm forgetting the name of the author. Perhaps you'll have it at your fingertips. But it was basically talking about, what a generous social democracy Germany is in terms of its support for the arts, in terms of, free tuition, job creation, et cetera. And that the productive base for that generosity is really under threat. I do have a propensity towards pessimism. Kind of defensive pessimism is how Doomberg has diagnosed me. And I'm curious, like, how bad do you think this is getting? How recoverable it is? Can the light switch be switched back on, or are there some long-term trends that are going to make this very difficult, or potentially even transform German society?
Transform German society in what sense?
In the sense in which that tweet was discussing, this generous society.
Yes. So what you should keep in mind about Germany: Germans are in general pretty heavily taxed, even compared to Scandinavian countries, which are well known for being heavily taxed. But for the last decades, one could at least think that even though you work hard and you earn a lot of money, but then have to pay a lot of taxes, you kinda are getting something for that, because even though you paid a lot of taxes, living costs were generally far lower than in a lot of other Western European countries. You could thunder across the Autobahn at high speeds. You were generally very free in the way you were living. The economy was doing good. It was easy to find a job, a good job. So yes, I think in the past it was really the deal. Yes, so you pay a lot of taxes and you might be grumpy about that, but you're at least kind of still getting something for that. And this promise feels very much broken right now. And when I think that for the last 30 years, the German political class has eroded the trust the German public put into it. In the 80s, we had a politician like Helmut Schmidt, which wasn't just a fierce social liberal force of reform, an ardent pro-nuclear politician, but he also was very honorable and very trustworthy in the way that he conducted being the chancellor of the country. When Palestinian terrorists took a German plane hostage and took it to Mogadishu with the German hostages, he ordered the storming of the plane by Spec Ops. And when he ordered the storming of the plane, he had in his drawer already prepared the speech for his resignation if the storming would go south. It didn't, so he didn't resign. But this is the type of politician that we used to have, which the German public put a lot of trust in, and those politicians were deserving of a lot of trust. And that isn't the case anymore. German politicians now resign for nothing. You can waste billions of people's money. You can be an absolute fuck up of a politician. It doesn't matter. You don't resign anymore. Because they have learned that they can weather any storm by just sitting where they are, as long as their fellow politicians don't actively try to push them out of their office. So trust has been eroded over the entire sector. Trust in the political class barely exists anymore, which I think is a high loss, because there is a real benefit in being a high trust society, especially when the trust is deserving. Okay, only when the trust is deserving, to be honest. But if you look the way that the Greek state in the modern time was built and conducting its business, Greece is such a low trust society that the structures of a modern functioning state in Greece couldn't really be built, because the public was resisting it, because the mind of what the government is that Greece had was the Ottoman Empire. And that hasn't been, for example, the case in Scandinavia. In Germany, you have like varying over history governments that are deserving of little or a lot of trust. And West Germany was a government deserving of a lot of trust, and that trust is now gone. And the trust is gone. The times are changing, and we probably will see very soon the collapse of Germany's industrial mind, as basically we are a country with little resources and high wages, so we needed to build high quality products to make up for that. But whatever earnings margins there were in those high quality, high priced products are now eaten by energy cost. And partially we also can't produce at the numbers that we were, because there just isn't enough energy. So we have less production and the same running cost. And German industry can't keep existing at this for any extended period of times. So it will go down if we don't see an increase in energy supply, which would need to be, where we would start with keeping the nuclear plants, but we would need to increase energy supply even more than this and keep it at a high level as we will try to reduce carbon emissions. Otherwise, German industry will go down permanently. And with it, every benefit that this country provides to all of its people, from subsidized arts, from good healthcare, from comparatively decent roads, to its ability to subsidize education for its people, to free museums, to monetary support for keeping up all building and all infrastructure, to preserve history. All that will be done and won't work if there isn't a potent industry that's profitable, that can pay for this with the taxes leveraged upon it.
Right. No, in the time we have left, I really want to pivot to an issue that connects our two countries I was alluding to earlier, and that is the great Canada-German Hydrogen Alliance, again announced during your Chancellor's visit to our country. Our Minister of Natural Resources, Minister Jonathan Wilkinson, has actually come to Germany's defense on the issue of Germany shutting down its nuclear plants, saying, I quote, "It's an internal matter for Germany," and saying nuclear power in Germany would have no bearing on the natural gas situation. I'm going to continue the quote here. From a technical perspective, nuclear energy generates electricity. Natural gas is actually used in industrial process applications and for some heating. They're not equivalent, and to somehow suggest that starting a nuclear reactor solves your gas problem is just factually wrong. This is our Minister of Natural Resources. So we've come to your politician's defense. And I wanted to get your thoughts on Chancellor Olaf's visit to Canada. Clearly, I think he was hoping to get a new natural gas supplier. I think my read on my own government's response there, which was, that there's not a business case for LNG exports to Germany. I think he just has to appease a climate concerned political base. Speaking about our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and that very much our plans to develop more LNG infrastructure. But that he had to sugarcoat that and virtue signal with this hydrogen deal. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and then I'd love to get a bit of an analysis, a technical analysis of what this Canada-German hydrogen alliance can deliver to Germany, and maybe make a comparison to how that compares to the ongoing output of the remaining nuclear stations.
If I hear this fucking line that a nuclear power plant can only make electricity and therefore we don't need it one more time, I will go fucking mental. Like, what do you think wind and solar do? Like, that people promoting wind and solar as the future of our energy supply, and that are trying to force through amounts of battery electric vehicles and heat pump that would crush our already under stress grid, then at the same point, while we are burning crap tons of coal and gas for our electricity supply, then turn around and say, oh, those nuclear plants, they only made electricity and not gas. I will go fucking mental. How stupid are those people? How deluded do they think that we are, that they will tell us this horse crap? Turning from renewables make electricity and that is the future and that is great and we will quickly increase electricity consumptions and need to keep all those coal plants we have on our grid off the grid, and then say, oh, we don't need nuclear power plants because they just made electricity. I will go insane. Sorry, how stupid can one be and how stupid can one think that we are? In all fairness, I think we haven't given them a good reason to think that we are not stupid because we have believed their lies for such a long time, to be fair. Okay, no, the hydrogen deal. What's the hydrogen deal? To my knowledge, the final goal of the hydrogen deal would be to import 500,000 tons of hydrogen in the form of ammonia from Canada every year. And they want to start importing hydrogen basically 2025, if I am not misinformed. And so if we look at what it would need to produce this amount of hydrogen, so we are talking about 500,000 tons of hydrogen. To make a ton of hydrogen from electricity, from just electricity, not steam electrolysis, where you could use some process heat, but just electricity, because that is all that wind and solar can provide you, electricity, and that isn't even reliable. A nuclear reactor can at least make process heat. You would need 50 megawatt hours per ton of hydrogen to produce it. And if we include the cost that it would take to the energy cost to power all these conversion processes, we would be talking about much more electricity. So 60, maybe 70 megawatt hours per ton at least. So we are talking about a good 30 terawatt hours of electricity that Canada would need to turn into hydrogen to get to the final goal of the 500,000 tons per year. To give you an idea how much 30 terawatt hours of electricity is, that is basically almost the entire wind fleet that currently exists in Canada and that Canada has built in the last 20 years. Which we would expect Canada to once again build in the time of a mere decade just for us. Not for itself to meet its own decarbonization targets, but just for us. Draining its pool of resources and most importantly its labor pool to a ridiculous extent to deliver us 500 tons of hydrogen, not to decarbonize its own economy, but just to deliver us those 500 tons of hydrogen.
Right. So Michael Rettberg had a post on this about the insanity of shipping hydrogen. You're quite a technical person yourself, but in terms of the feasibility of that, again, from what I understand, we're cracking distilled water molecules to make the hydrogen, turning it into ammonia, shipping it across the ocean.
The making of the hydrogen is
just walk us through the step-by-step process here, not in a ton of technical depth, but just so I understand it.
So what they want to do is there are two types of electrolyzer that you could use for the production of the hydrogen: alkali or proton exchange membrane electrolyzers. In the alkali electrolyzers, you would probably just put the cathodes and the anodes into an alkaline solution. That's what you would do. In the proton exchange membrane, you would do it a bit more differently. You would essentially have the water, the one side of the membrane where the one electrode would be, and then have the water split into hydrogen ions, protons, right there. And then, which is also a positive effect because only the protons can pass through. So deuterium ions, which you would need for heavy water, can't pass through. This is the reason why, for example, heavy water in the past only was a thing that we knew from electrolysis before it was a valuable commodity. But I'm getting off target here. Sorry. The proton exchange membranes electrolyzers are more expensive. They have the promise of being more efficient and could run demand response better than the alkaline electrolyzers. To the degree to which they are more efficient, I don't know. What I've read is that they are that the difference in efficiency is negligible, and proton exchange membrane electrolyzers are more expensive and they last for a shorter period of time. So I would suspect that they would use alkaline electrolyzers. Steam electrolysis isn't really an option here because, I mean, you could use nuclear, but if you really want to use only renewables, how would you get process
Actually,
heat?
there was an
Electricity.
announcement. There was a plan to use, I think, some of the grid electricity from New Brunswick, which has a CANDU reactor in it, providing, I think, 20% of the electricity. And there was a big stink put up. I don't think it was a German government official, but German environmentalists saying that this might break the deal if they were to use nuclear electricity to feed into this project to begin with.
Fucking break the deal. Do it. There is really something for you.
So I want to use our time wisely here. We don't need to go through all of the chemical processes and the technologies. But how
I'm
does
bad at this? I'm getting off target very easily.
That's okay. So
if you want to, if you want really to talk to me about making, if you want to hear me talk about making hydrogen and turning it into all those processes, that would stretch the.
Right. And you've done a bit of that with Emmett Penny over at Nuclear Barbarian.
Yes.
So go and check that out.
We will be soon releasing another episode.
Excellent.
So especially on hydrogen and hydrogen types, and types in the way, in the ways it is sourced and how to use it.
So just, I guess, to wrap up, can you give us a sense again of the contribution of this hydrogen, if it ever comes to fruition, and folks like Michael Rettberg are saying just it's not going to happen. Hydrogen is volumetrically not dense. Something like 3 times the amount of shipping is required. The temperatures that you need to chill to liquefy it, I think, are maybe 20 degrees from absolute zero. Incredibly energy intensive, not going to be economically viable. But all that aside, if Germany did succeed with this, and if Canada and Germany succeeded in this collaboration, how much electricity would be produced by this hydrogen being, again, turned to ammonia, shipped across the Atlantic, turned back into hydrogen, and burned in German power plants?
So
how would that compare to the nuclear output?
The energy content of a ton of hydrogen is 38 megawatt hours. And that includes the condensation enthalpy of the water that is produced in the burning. Depending on the applications that you have, those condensation enthalpy can't be used. For example, internal combustion engines can't use the condensation enthalpy. External combustion engines and your furnace in your home could use it. If we talk about, so that's 38 upper heating value for 38 megawatt hours per ton. So if we have 38 megawatt hours per ton and 500,000 tons, then we would be talking about 19 terawatt hours of heat that is stored in those 500,000 tons of hydrogen. So then those 500,000 tons of hydrogen used optimally in a combined cycle gas turbine with an efficiency of 60%, we would be talking about 11 terawatt hours of electricity. To put that into perspective, last year the ISAR 2 reactor in Bavaria made 11 terawatt hours of electricity. And last year we burned 870 terawatt hours of natural gas.
Wow.
So what this hydrogen deal would do, it would displace 1/20 of our natural gas, and if turned into electricity in the most efficient way, would be able to provide for 1/50th, a bit more than 1/50th, 1/45th of our electricity, the same amount as this one nuclear reactor would use.
And to be
so
clear,
we will be importing the entirety of we would be importing hydrogen made from a wind fleet as large as what Canada has built now in the last 20 years to displace one nuclear reactor in Germany.
Not to mention developing the export infrastructure, the capacity to freeze that hydrogen down to.
I mean, given what
yeah,
the cost of a gigawatt of installed wind will be at least 1.5 billion. The cost of a gigawatt of electrolyzers also at least 1 million. I have very little idea of what it will cost to build the ammonia production and transportation. So, but I mean, we will be talking here about an investment in the realm of 25 to 30 billion euros. What is it in Canadian dollars? Like 40 billion Canadian dollars? Maybe 50? I don't know. Last time I was in Canada was 2018. And back then was 1.4 to 1. And yes, so 25 to 30 billion euros, 40 to 50 billion Canadian dollars, I think, to replace a paid-off, well-running nuclear reactor making dirt cheap electricity that when it was new did cost 4 billion euros in today's money.
Right. I guess
not including the power plants in Germany that also have to run on the hydrogen.
Right. I guess as a sort of wrapping up here as a conclusion, I'm sensing a theme running throughout this, which is if there is a public service with engineering discipline, either on the Canadian side within the Ministry of Natural Resources or on the German side, how are they not just cackling and laughing or crying into their handkerchiefs as they see their leaders concoct these kind of plans? Like, is this is just pure virtue signaling? Is this propaganda? Is this like willful deception of a gullible public that just didn't get educated on these issues? I guess I'm less interested in that, but what about that public service? What about that line of defense, which is people with competence in government? Is this a failure of duty on their behalf to whistleblow and speak out? I mean, to me, this is just absolutely shocking in the context of the seriousness of the energy crisis. with the fact that almost certainly people will be going hungry throughout the world in the coming 6 to 12 months because of the fertilizer crisis. In the context of people maybe freezing to death in Europe this winter, that these kind of the unseriousness of the solutions that are being proposed to us by some of the wealthiest countries in the world, it's mind-boggling. So your thoughts on that, I guess, in closing, and feel free, you can drop all the F-bombs you want, Noah. It's got freedom of speech on this podcast.
I think when I plan to go here, I have like really the idea of insulting a lot of people, and then I don't. Look, I would maybe close this with something more productive. Okay, and then I will go down the street, smoke a cigarette, and insult the next tree, imagining that it's Habeck. All right, I think that would be a better value to your listeners. And if they want they want to see me insulting people, they can follow me on Twitter.
Okay.
Look, trying to analyze the situation here, the modus operandi of our government seems to be the following: we are committing radically to this 100% renewable scenario for the long term. And we are shortening the time span to which we do that. While we are wasting time doing nothing, we are taking the goal closer to us. It's like a fat person that on Christmas says, "I will be in good shape for the beach season," and then in February he hasn't lost any weight, and then say, "Oh no, I will be in good shape by April." It's getting incredibly more ridiculous. Not to mention that, unlike being thin, 100% renewables isn't even a target worth pursuing. But just the deluded sense of the timetable they are talking about. But this is essentially the sense. They promise 100% renewables, and they also made somewhat true on that in the way that they are politically steering the trajectory of Germany into this direction, where we would be in the long term actually get our energy from this, like doing ridiculous hydrogen deals and banning internal combustion engines. Actually, they are doing the shit that would be needed to do this if it could be done physically at all. And at the same time, they do really expensive, really inefficient short-term commitments to fossil fuels, mostly based on old crap, like taking back already decommissioned coal power plants, and keep digging in the old lignite mines, and hastily building some provisional LNG terminals, and doing some deals here and there, and always shying away from long-term commitment. And I mean, long-term, not forever. I mean, even with what we would be talking about transition, until 2050, in the 1950s, even there they are not willing to commit this. When Qataris asked us, Habeck went to Qatar in the spring to beg for natural gas, and when the Qataris said, "Okay, then let's do a commitment for 20 years," Habeck said, "I don't want that." So extremely expensive commitment to fossil fuels for the short term, commitment for the long term towards the 100% delusion. 100% renewable delusion. That is their modus operandi. And as we are committing to this long-term goal of 100% renewables, the near-term measures that we are doing to keep the lights on, even barely on, to get the fossil fuels that we need, will be getting more dirty and more expensive as we are relying more and more on old crap and aren't building anything new. We aren't. We basically said we will ban internal combustion engines. So automakers say, okay, we won't develop more efficient engines anymore. We will say we don't want to use oil anymore. So oil refineries use the same old inefficient crap they have been using since the last 30 years. We don't want to invest in new fossil fuel power plants anymore. I mean, even gas plants aren't even really on the table anymore. So we keep using the old inefficient shit that's more expensive to operate and more unreliable by the time. fossil fuel plants aren't nuclear plants. They don't live that long. And if you try to keep them running longer, it isn't going well. So this is the modus operandi. Short-term fossil, long-term 100% renewables, a trajectory for disaster. And that's what we're doing. And disaster will strike if we don't get away from this. We will need a very long-term commitment to basically 100% nuclear or close to 100% nuclear for the long term. We will need like a medium to long-term commitment to natural gas, as it is the least dirty of all the fossil fuels. And also we have some reasonable resources that we can extract here in Germany. We would need to build new combined cycle gas turbines to replace the old ones and to replace the coal plants. And we would need to rebuilding more modern, more efficient oil refineries and having a more sensible decisions on what we would want to be powered with grid or battery electricity. Keeping in mind the limitations of the grid, even in a scenario where we have a lot of nuclear plants. But we aren't doing that. We are steering into disaster, and it's mind-boggling. It seems to me that whatever is coming, it doesn't shake their commitment to the green dream, to their vision. They can't shake their commitment. It reigns supreme. In the long term, the vision needs to be kept standing, and in the long term, we can do some fossil fuel sins to not have the people impale us with pitchforks. That's what they're doing. I think we will see a lot of anger and hate from Germans that will see their lives ruined from this. The lives ruined, their hopes and dreams and ambitions crushed. We will probably see demonstrations. In typical German fashion, probably a lot of people will also be too shy to go there, especially as the far right will try to undermine this movement, try to consume it. There will be some hard times, both politically and economically, and from an energy point of view, coming to us. I do not work in a pretty energy-intensive industry. What our cost mostly comes from some very special items and labor cost. So we aren't. My job isn't really affected by this. In that way, I'm fortunate. I'm really fortunate in the situation. It doesn't affect me that much actually, but it affects a lot of people around me, people that I know personally, broadly from the internet, or basically in generally the entire nation from what I can read. And it isn't pretty to look at, even when you are not that much threatened. And even if you're not that much threatened, you see that you now pay for petrol like 40% more than you used to do. You pay for food, depending on what item you talk, 20% to 100% more. And when you are faced with once again not having enough fucking toilet paper at the shop, I mean, how is this allowed to happen? Especially when you hear what all those companies that are now going under talk about, they are mostly left alone. What help they get from government largely comes too late in insufficient quantities, or not really helpful in general. Meanwhile, they bail out Uniper for 12 billion euros, and whoever is doing well now will be threatened with an Übergewinnsteuer. Basically, if your company is doing well financially now, which essentially comes down to you didn't make all the fucking stupid decisions that the other ones did. You will now be punished for this. So if you didn't do stupid decisions, you will go down. If you do the right decisions, you will be taxed for it. And if you do the fucking stupidest decisions that anyone could ever do, there is a chance that you will get bailed out and have to suffer nothing, while tens of millions of people will see their dreams crushed. And I like this country. I'm not that beholden to it. I mean, I can do decently well English. Leaving this country is something that I have thought several times. Maybe I will in the future. And many people that can speak fluent English and that have learned or studied a good trade, have an engineering degree, have some competency that they can sell abroad, might also leave this country if the situation doesn't improve. And there seems to be no political vector currently that could improve this. All vectors that seems to be generally aware or criticizing of the situation are not really constructive. And all that where I could see that they could maybe do a constructive change aren't really doing anything generally or aren't doing stuff in adequate amounts trying to keep this up. There has been some less terrible statements coming from the conservative or liberal party, but even from them, I don't really expect the change that we would need. I wouldn't expect anything half decent coming from the far right, and the Greens and Social Democrats won't do anything. They have committed to the 100% renewables vision, and they will probably see this country collapse before they get off that path. And if this happens, there is the possibility of a brain drain here in Germany. If all those industry goes down, then there will be a lot of unemployed, competent people. Most of them will be speaking fluent English. I don't expect them to stay a lot longer here if they are not bound by family.
Well, Noah, you're welcome in Canada anytime. I've got to run now. I'm going to go pick up my son from kindergarten. We still use that German word. Pleasure having you back.
It was a pleasure to be here, even though that it ended very sad.
It would be lovely to have you for an episode where we could just be really happy about something. So let's keep our fingers crossed that something good happens in the next few months. This line that came up with Robert Parker around the patronage relationship that nuclear has, not with some rentier class group of part of society, but rather a patronage relationship with physics. Perhaps that will bring some common sense. We saw with the averted closure of Diablo Canyon in California, with Gavin Newsom most recently being interviewed and talking about the critical role of Diablo Canyon in assuring Californian baseload and preventing blackouts. Maybe, I hope it doesn't get to that, but blackouts may bring some sanity and we might see a policy reversal. Noah, again, thanks for coming back on. And
I don't want to see blackouts.
No, I don't either. to clear the record. Okay, I got to run, brother. Great chatting with you, and we'll talk to you soon again on Decouple.